The desert wind howled that night, carrying dust and silence across the empty plains. Inside a lonely wooden cabin, a rancher sat near the fire, nursing the ache of another empty day. Life had become little more than survival since his wife passed. Days spent mending fences, nights staring at the horizon. But fate has a strange way of finding the broken. As he stepped outside to check the stables, he heard a faint whimper. Half hidden behind a barrel, a small Apache child shivered in the cold, eyes wide with fear and hunger. He froze for a moment, unsure if it was a trap. Out here, trust could get you killed. But something about the child's trembling hands and dirt-streaked face tore through his caution. Without a word, he knelt, wrapped the boy in his coat and carried him inside. The child didn't speak, just watched with those deep ancient eyes that seemed to hold more sorrow than any child should bear. The rancher gave him soup, a blanket, and a place by the fire. For the first time in years, the cabin felt alive again. Through the night, the boy stirred in feverish sleep, whispering words in Apache the rancher couldn't understand. He sat nearby, dabbing the child's forehead with water, whispering soft reassurances to no one in particular. He wasn't sure why he cared so much, maybe because he too had once been lost and forgotten. When dawn crept over the desert, painting the sky with gold and crimson, the sound of hoofbeats shattered the stillness. Someone was coming fast, and whoever it was rode like thunder. He stepped outside, rifle in hand. Out of the rising dust appeared a woman, tall, fierce, and dressed in worn Apache garments. Her presence commanded the land itself. Her hair flowed black as night, her eyes sharp with both fury and grief. She dismounted, eyes landing on the cabin. "You found him," she said in a deep, steady voice. "My son." The rancher lowered his rifle, suddenly understanding. The child hadn't been abandoned. He'd been separated, lost in the chaos of a raid or flight. The woman stepped forward, towering over him, her face etched with exhaustion and sorrow. "You saved him," she said simply. The rancher nodded, unsure how to speak. He offered her water, and she accepted, sitting by the fire beside her sleeping child. For a long time, silence stretched between them, not awkward, but heavy with unspoken pain. He noticed the scars on her arms, the signs of struggle and endurance. She wasn't just a mother, she was a survivor. As the morning warmed, she told him fragments of her story. Bandits had attacked her camp, scattering her people. She'd searched for days, following faint tracks through dust and wind, until she found the cabin. The rancher listened, saying little. When she finished, she looked at him and asked softly, "Why did you help him?" He hesitated, then replied, "Because I've lost someone too." Their eyes met, and for the first time, she didn't look like a stranger. The boy awoke later that day, weak but alive. When he saw his mother, he clung to her with quiet sobs. The rancher turned away, feeling something ache in his chest, a bittersweet reminder of the family he once had. The woman noticed and spoke gently. "You have a kind heart," she said. "Few men would risk helping one of us." He shook his head. "Kindness ain't bravery," he murmured. "It's just what's right." They stayed through the night, sharing food and quiet stories under the open sky. The stars above seemed brighter than usual, the air softer. When dawn returned again, she packed to leave. The boy clung to the rancher, reluctant to go. She placed her hand on the rancher's shoulder. "The desert remembers kindness," she said, "and so will we." Then, with her son in her arms, she rode toward the horizon, vanishing into the rising sun. For a long time, the rancher stood watching, the sound of her horse fading into the wind. His cabin was silent again, but it no longer felt empty. He looked at the fire, still glowing softly, and realized that maybe, in saving the child, he had saved a piece of himself too. In a land ruled by violence and loss, a single act of mercy had broken the silence of a lonely man's life. That night, as stars blanketed the sky once more, he whispered to the wind, "You're welcome, little one." Somewhere beyond the hills, the desert wind carried the faint echo of an answer, the song of a mother and child, alive and free. The desert was quiet that night, the kind of silence that hums beneath the wind. The rancher had spent years alone among the sand and the scrub, fixing fences and feeding the same few horses that hadn't yet run off. He wasn't expecting anyone, least of all the tiny sound that reached him when he stepped outside. It was a cry faint but real. Behind an old water barrel, he found a small Apache boy curled up, trembling from cold and fear, dust clinging to his hair. He hesitated, knowing how dangerous it could be to get involved with tribal matters out here. But one look into those eyes, haunted, hollow, and far too old for such a young face, tore through every defense. Without a word, he scooped the child up, carried him inside, and wrapped him in his coat. The boy didn't speak, didn't resist, just stared at the fire as if he'd forgotten what warmth felt like. The rancher handed him a tin cup of water and a bowl of stew, waiting for trust to settle between them. Through the long hours, the man stayed near the fire while the boy drifted in and out of restless dreams. He spoke in fragments of Apache words the rancher couldn't understand, whispers of loss and fear. The rancher couldn't imagine what kind of horror had driven a child this far into the wilderness, but he didn't ask. Sometimes silence was the only kindness a man could give. As dawn began to glow over the horizon, he stepped outside and froze. A figure was riding toward the ranch, fast and steady, the rising sun cutting her outline in gold. She was tall, fierce, and unmistakably Apache, her long braids swinging with every stride. When she dismounted, her eyes met his with a mix of gratitude and warning. "You have my son," she said simply. He lowered his rifle. She wasn't here for a fight. Her voice carried strength, but her face showed exhaustion, the kind that comes from miles of searching and days without rest. Inside, she knelt beside the boy, her large, scarred hands trembling as she brushed dust from his cheek. The rancher stood by, saying nothing, feeling strangely small in her presence. She looked up at him finally. "You helped him." It wasn't a question. He nodded once. "Seemed like the right thing to do," he replied quietly. Her expression softened. "Few white men think that way," she said. "Most see only enemies." They shared a silent breakfast by the fire while the boy slept. She spoke of bandits, raids, and loss, of a husband buried beneath the desert rocks. He listened, understanding pain if not her language. When she rose to leave, she placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "You showed mercy. The land remembers." Then she rode off with her child, the dust of her horse catching the new sun. The rancher watched until they vanished into the horizon. For the first time in years, the desert didn't feel so empty. He went back inside, sat by the fire, and smiled faintly to himself. Maybe, he thought, kindness wasn't something the world took from a man. It was something he gave back, one lost soul at a time.